guys, this is Mrs. Sharpley, and this week we are talking about combining texts. And combining means that you are taking one, two, maybe even more things and you are putting them together. So this week we're talking about if you read two different texts, but they're about the same topic, you're able to take all of that information together and mix it up and formulate your own thoughts. You can be able to speak about it and be able to write about it. So it's kind of like a recipe, because at home when you're making a bunch of cookies, you don't just put flour in it, because that would not be very good cookies. You need to make sure to put the sugar and the chocolate, and so you're putting all the different pieces together. So it's kind of like a recipe. So I went ahead and this is our sheet for this week. I went ahead and started coloring mine first just to save a little bit of time, but you can color yours at the end today. So you're going to go ahead and glue it into your notebook. And right here you have your little chef. Your chef may be a girl like mine, or yours might be a boy. But it says that a recipe for combining, and it's going to be information, because we're taking information from those two texts and putting them together. Okay, so it's a recipe for combining information from two texts on the same subject. All right, and then when we do that, we're going to determine the main idea that is the same between both texts. So if we are, for example, reading about the Titanic the last couple of weeks, and we read about two different texts, but they're both about the Titanic, so we're able to say, okay, the main idea of the first text is about the Titanic and its sinking, and then the other text, it has the very same main idea. So the first thing about reading two different texts is making sure that their main idea is the same or similar. So determine the main idea that is the same between both texts. After we do that, then we are going to compare and contrast the two texts to gain a deeper understanding of the subject. So we know that our very best strategy is rereading. So when we read a text, we want to be able to reread it and pull out those details that's going to give us a better understanding of what we're reading. And then after we gather those details in the two texts, then we're able to compare and contrast them. And of course, comparing means that we're seeing what is similar, and contrasting means that we are seeing how they are different. So we are going to compare and contrast the two texts to gain a deeper understanding of the subject. Move that a little bit for you. After we do that, then we want to determine the point of view from which the passage is written. So we've talked a little bit about point of view, and when you hear point of view, you should probably think, oh, first person or third person? Because that's going to make a little bit of a difference for us. Of course, first person means that when the author is writing, they are in the story or in the passage. So they're saying things like I, me, mine, our. Whereas if it was a third person text, then they're saying things like he, she, they. And so that is just one way that our two texts that we're comparing can be similar, or maybe they'll be different. So we need to determine the point of view. So determine the point of view from which the passage is written. Okay. Then lastly, we need to consider the author's perspective. What is his or her attitude toward the topic? And perspective is how they look at it. because the perspective of the Titanic sinking, for example, is going to be a little bit different for somebody who actually lived through it versus somebody else who, didn't necessarily go through it, but maybe they had a relative who passed away. So those two perspectives would be a little bit different. We kind of talked last week about accounts, and that kind of is very similar to perspective in the fact that sometimes a person's perspective when they go through it, they're going to have a little bit more information, and maybe they'll be a little bit more passionate about it. And then, of course, attitude is going to make a really big difference for us, because if I'm reading about maybe an article about dogs and the author really likes dogs, you're going to be able to see that the author likes dogs. Whereas maybe if the author was writing about a time that their dog, destroyed their house and they don't have a dog anymore because they just hated the experience, then that person writing about dogs, it's going to be more negative, and their attitude is going to very much affect the writing piece. So we need to consider the author's perspective and what is his or her attitude toward the topic. And of course, people's attitude, that affects us. If people are happy, we're happy. So if the people have a negative attitude, then that affects us as well. So we need to start to look at two texts and also see their attitude, the author's attitude towards the topic. All right, we have some activities this week with combining texts, and hopefully this has given you a little bit better understanding of what you'll be doing this week.